Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's our first inaugural meeting. The inaugural meeting will be the first meeting of Lewisham Muslim Voice, first and only independent Muslim voice of Lewisham. Hopefully we can carry on forward and become even more successful. So can I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim for our first meeting, and can I say Assalamu alaikum to everyone. And please, Ahmed is going to do a little dua to start the meeting.
As our co-convener and secretary Uncle Rashid said, Assalamu alaikum, that is the traditional Islamic greeting, may peace be upon you. And as is customary and an obligation upon us as Muslims, we start off anything beneficial with remembrance of God and praising our Prophet. So simply put, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. And back to our conveners.
So let me tell you who we are. We're called Lewisham Muslim Voice, L.M.V. We started about 6 weeks ago, purely in response to what's happening in Gaza and the fact that the Lewisham Muslims aren't being heard in town hall or anywhere else. So this group will hopefully be the voice of the Muslims within Lewisham going forward. Today's meeting is about these gentlemen here and who they represent and why they are here today. They will introduce themselves, and Tony is going to start that meeting on that basis. So again, welcome, and can I hand it to Tony?
Okay, so we would first like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First we would like to each of our guests tonight to introduce themselves, and then I will say a little bit about how we're going to run the meeting. So first I'll introduce myself. My name is Tony. I'm chair of the Lewisham Muslim Voice. So I will hand over to my next.
Hi, I'm Mike Herron. I'm the Green Party candidate for Mayor. I used to be in the Labour Party, but I left the Labour Party because of their position on the Iraq War.
I'm John Hamilton. I'm standing in this election for the Workers' Party of Britain, but many of you will know of my activities through Lewisham People Before Profit over the last 15 or so years.
Good evening, I'm Chris Mains, I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. Can I just thank Muslim Voice for organising this? This is the only hustings of this campaign, which says something about the way the Labour Council has really closed down community engagement, and one of the reasons I'm standing is I really want to break the culture of Lewisham Council, which is very secretive, the one-party state. It really doesn't reach out and engage with people. So thank you very much for organising tonight.
Assalamu alaikum. My name's Nick Long. I'm standing as independent, but I'm being backed by the Transform Party, a new party that was formed in Nottingham in November. I'm standing on a platform and programme of abolishing the mayor, but also in light of the genocide and the horrific events we're seeing day by day, every day on our TV screens, obviously raising the issue of Gaza, and I'm calling for the borough to twin with Gaza and build on from there a petition to get that underway. If neither of us win in a few days' time, then we can be lobbying and petitioning the council to keep the focus on what's happening in Gaza centre and make sure that we put forward an awareness of what's happening, the genocide that's happening in Gaza.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just say that we invited all the candidates to turn up today, but unfortunately the Christian Alliance, they declined to come, but they sent a fairly derogatory statement which they asked us to read, which we are not going to read for you. Labour Party has declined to turn up, and unfortunately, or fortunately as the case may be, the Tories haven't responded at all. So that leaves that. So that tells you the state of play. And can I go back to Tony now?
Okay, thank you. Before, just a few words. There is one toilet here, and so if anybody wants to use it, it's just through this door on your right. As far as I'm aware, there's no other fire exit other than the door. So if there is an emergency, we'll ask everybody to file out as quickly as possible. And what we would also ask everybody is, let us keep the meeting. As Muslims, we would expect this anyway, polite, respectful to our guests. We are thankful for them to sacrifice their time to come and talk to us. can we have one sister to come up and make a quick announcement before we get on to the main business?
Sorry. So we are Lewisham Muslim Voice. We are just starting off as an organisation, and we have a small amount to cover. For example, at this meeting, we take any donations.
Also.
Sorry.
Well done. Well done.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the format that we have with this meeting is we send 3 initial questions to the candidates, and then we will take other questions from the floor. But what we would like to do is there will be stewards around with pens and paper. So if people have a question they would like to ask, we'll collect those questions and then read them to the candidates. What we would, the format that we would like to do is we'll put one question out, we will let each candidate respond in turn, and then we'll move on to the next question. What we would do is we would like candidates to sort of bear in mind that we have a limited amount of time, and so maybe a couple of minutes per question or something. I don't think that would be fine. Okay, so without further ado, the first question that we actually wrote to the candidates beforehand is, what is your personal and your party's position and record on publicly calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza? So if I can pass to Mike.
Personally, I've been for an immediate ceasefire from the very beginning in Gaza. The Green Party nationally was the first mainstream party to call for an immediate ceasefire and for an immediate release of all the hostages.
John.
We should change the order for taking questions. Yeah?
Okay, we can start from that end.
Okay, yeah. Workers' Party of Britain is for self-determination for the Palestinian people. It feels that there should be only a single state in what's known as Palestine for Jews and Arabs to live in equality in a secular state. And therefore we completely condemn the Israeli aggression against the people of Palestine. The people of Palestine have the right to resist occupation. This is a right under the Geneva Convention, and that is all they have been doing to try and liberate themselves from over 70 years of occupation by Israel. Therefore, of course we don't think there should be a war. Of course Israel must stop fighting and stop murdering innocent people, and a ceasefire should have come into effect the moment Israel started the aggression. It should have been enforced by the United Nations, because Israel flagrantly disregards United Nations resolutions and has done for decades. That's also my personal view.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
As many of you will know, that the Liberal Democrat spokesman is Layla Moran, who herself is Palestinian. I think she's the only member of House of Commons who is from Palestine, or got a Palestinian background. And because her own family have been involved in Gaza, I think she's been able to make quite passionate pleas on the humanitarian problems and issues that have been arisen around the Israelis' act of aggression. Clearly, we need to get the 200 hostages from the 7th of October released. And I think we should remember that these issues did not start on the 7th of October. There has been awful treatment of Palestinians imprisoned in Israel for many months, many years, and that is part of the issue here. We as a party have been calling for a bilateral ceasefire. We are desperate for the Red Cross to be allowed to get into Gaza and for aid to be there. I'm very pleased that today Ed Davey, our leader, has been calling for sanctions against some of the Israeli politicians who are perpetrating the war in such an aggressive manner, and will clearly need to be held to account.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Basically, yes, unconditional unilateral, universal ceasefire, any politician that doesn't announce that to you doesn't deserve your vote.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would go further. If I was elected as mayor, any member of staff who worked for the council, any contractor who took part in a genocide that's happening in Gaza, I would be liaising with the borough police commander to make sure that person is facing charges.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so for the next question, I think we, as you said, we'll mix it up. So if we start with Chris, John, no, start with Nick, sorry, start with Nick and go this way. So, what is your and or your party's position on Britain's role in what has been described as a genocide by the International Criminal Court, or potentially a genocide, I think they said. Do you support boycott, divestment and sanctions against the Israeli apartheid regime? And if you were elected as mayor, how would you ensure that none of the residents' council tax money would be invested in companies supporting the Israeli regime?
Thank you. Well, indeed, we would be very keen, or if I was elected as mayor, we'd be very keen as a council to lead the boycott campaign. Many countries around the world are doing similar things. This right-wing Tory government, I believe, has introduced legislation that makes that difficult. But I would certainly want to explore how we could take that forward. And if we couldn't, then we should, like a country I'm going to mention shortly, would only purchase that as a last desperate resort. So we would be in the forefront of leading that campaign. The International Court of Justice is actually calling for Israel as a case to answer. And that's definitely universally around the world, especially in the third world. That's the position of many, many countries who are actively boycotting. But I must be honest with you, we have, and it's not surprising tonight that the Labour Party haven't bothered to send a deputy or come along with a detailed explanation of why they're not here, is because the Labour Party is suspending candidates, we've got a councillor here in Lewisham who's been suspended. I was on the march with her recently. She's given full support to the Gaza struggle. But we have a Labour group here, which almost to the man and woman are members of Labour Friends of Israel. That is an organisation, if you look at their register of interests, you can see that many of them are starting to withdraw that declaration because they're fearful that they're going to be exposed. So this meeting is very, very important for you as an organisation. You need to break from the Labour Party. You need to seriously register, maybe as a political party or an organisation, and stand candidates in the coming election, pending general election. And my party, Transform, would give any candidate who wanted to run, make an intervention around Gaza, full backing and support. I'm losing my thread of thought because your last question related to...
It was basically about your position on Britain's role in the genocide.
Well, it's been horrific. Arms are being sent to the conflict, and we must be part of that campaign to stop export of arms to Israel.
Well, as I said earlier, Ed Davey has today been calling for sanctions against individual members of the Israeli establishment who are perpetrating a lot of the awful atrocities. I think we have to be realistic. Lewisham Council is not going to bring about peace in Gaza. It's a limited amount of things that a council can do. It can raise awareness, it can make sure that voices are heard. Also, the thing that people don't always remember is the vast amount of money that a council has in its pension funds and holding it in reserves and investments. And I would make sure that that is ethically invested. And we shouldn't be, as a community, investing in arms full stop. And certainly not investing in companies that are selling arms to the Israelis at the moment.
Thank you. Well, you may have heard of George Galloway. He's the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. He's standing for election in Rochdale today, and let's hope he becomes an MP and really puts that in focus. But you may also know that there was something called a convoy to Gaza about 20 years ago, maybe even more than 20 years ago now, which George was part of. And I think that that shows the party's record on that. I myself, I run a choir. We sing several songs about Palestine, and one of them is the boycott song, which we sang up at Crystal Palace Friends of Palestine the other day. So encouraging ordinary people to boycott Israeli goods. And certainly I agree with Nick and with Chris that if I'm elected as mayor, I will make sure that there's nothing invested in Israeli companies in the way of the council's pension funds or other investments that they have. There may be something I missed there. Was there anything about arms?
Well, only, sorry, it's my long-winded questions, but it was only about your position on Britain's role.
Yeah, Britain has been supporting the Israeli army. That's not you and me, it's not any of us here. It's Sunak and Starmer, and there's quite a few people in Sunak's cabinet that have personal connections with Israel. Grant Shapps is the defence minister at the moment, having gone through various different jobs. Britain is supplying, through British Aerospace, important parts of the F-35 fighters that Israel is using. There are reconnaissance flights being taken off from British planes from Cyprus to aid the Israelis, and in many respects, you know, there's British law itself is being broken by sending arms to a war zone, and yet they just flout these rules with impunity.
Thank you.
The Green Party nationally has a 4-point plan to deal for Britain to deal with Gaza. It's to stop exporting arms to Israel. We should use our vote on the UN Security Council to support the creation of a Palestinian state, an independent Palestine, which should sanction members of the Israeli government and should condemn Israeli actions. The problem with boycotting and divesting is because the council may be tied up with pre-existing contracts and it might have problems divesting, but we think it would be more effective to target individual members of the Israeli government personally and with sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the third question from Lewisham Muslim Voice is really about your relationships with Lewisham's Muslim community. So what we're asking is, how would you and your party envisage working with the Muslim community in Lewisham and their concerns going forward, including in other upcoming elections? This year is going to be an election year. There's the London mayor, there's the national election coming up, and I think that one of the issues that people have felt from the community, or at least some people in the community have felt, is that the community is expected almost to go along with what other people say, rather than being recognised as actually having their own agendas and things. And often politicians come to sort of start advertising their wares as opposed to actually having a plan to how they are going to work and respond to the community. So again, I apologise for being long-winded. Maybe Chris, can we start with you, and then go to Nick, and then Mike, and then John.
I would like to see the council work really closely with all faith groups. I wouldn't want to single out any particular group for particular praise or advantage, because as a mayor, you have to work with the whole community and bring faith groups together. And members of the Muslim community suffer exactly the same issues as everyone else in Lewisham. If you're in social housing, often it is a dreadful condition, because Lewisham Council has neglected its housing, it's failed to invest in new properties for families, and it's failed to invest in repairs. That affects lots of people in our community, and we should be working together across the board to tackle that. It is incredible to think that 75% of the council's housing maintenance budget goes in legal fees and compensation for work they've not done. And that just shows there are many people who aren't getting their damp dealt with, or the repairs done, the estate repairs, the lifts aren't working, and they're being neglected by a council that just takes them for granted, quite frankly. So I would want to be working with you and all the other faith communities and non-faith communities to engage with them, because one of the problems, as I said earlier, is that Lewisham Council simply doesn't engage. It's this little conclave of Labour people that don't talk to the rest of us, don't allow the rest of us to ask questions or interrogate them and raise issues. We've got to really smash that culture, make it much more open, transparent and engaging.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As a candidate, I've got to be very careful about receiving money, but it doesn't stop me from giving money. And this important meeting today, I'm going to make a donation to your campaign, because what you're about, I think, is very, very important. Because you are coming to life as an organisation and you want to have a change that's happening. And so my party, Transform, would be working with you, as I mentioned already, in terms of any lobby, any petition. Obviously, many of us have been joining the marches that have been going on. This conflict, this war, this genocide is going to go on, I think, for many, many months yet. We need to keep those marches going. The establishment are really trembling because they're really worried about these marches. It's really putting pressure. And can I ask you to take one moment of your time on Saturday? There's a conference, a very important conference. Many of us will be going on the march, but if you can send representatives to a conference on Saturday at Mallet Street, and it's called No Ceasefire, No Vote, and it's bringing together the Muslim community around the country. What's not being told is that across the country, Labour are losing control of many, many councils. Oxford, I believe, Bradford, many others where councillors have resigned and are standing as independents. So I would strongly urge you to think, to contemplate and discuss the possibility of standing, maybe independent candidates in the coming election, so you can keep Gaza front and centre.
The Greens would welcome the opportunity to work with the Muslim community. We know that housing and social housing is a bigger issue for the Muslim community than the rest of the borough. And we also know that education and safe education and a strong education is important for the Muslim community. We hear you and we're listening and we want to work with you. Thank you.
The Workers' Party of Britain has worked for a long time in predominantly Muslim areas. You'll probably remember that George Galloway has previously represented areas with a high Muslim vote, probably because of his support for Gaza and Palestinian rights in the past. I'm no exception. I'm not a Muslim, I'm an atheist. That might put some of you off, but I'm honest about it. I work with anybody in Lewisham, and I think my record is good on that. And I would welcome initiatives from Muslims, just as from other parts of the population of Lewisham. Thank you.
Okay, so those were the questions that we had from ourselves as Lewisham Muslim Voice. What we would now like to do is, if those people who have pads to go around, if you have a question, there's a...
I've got some questions.
Okay, you've got some, if you can bring the questions that you have got up.
If anyone's still writing them, just keep your hands up and I'll come and collect them up.
Yeah.
If anyone
We'll have some
wants
questions
to write
from the
one,
floor.
just keep your hands up, I'll bring some people for you.
While you're doing that, there's a couple of questions that have been sent to us already. I think one of them may have been covered already by the answers in the last one. But I will read one of the questions that we've had from the floor already. The Prime Minister described peaceful protesters as a mob, an extremist to intimidate and threaten MPs, disrupt their events and disturb council meetings, stoking the flames of Islamophobia, which has risen by 335% from the 7th of October. How will you combat discrimination which may arise by comments made from the government and opposition? So, let me say that again. So basically, we have all heard in the news that there's been comments from leading politicians describing all the Gaza marches and everything like that, which have been overwhelmingly peaceful. Many people here have been on them, as being a mob, as being extremists, and that language, we believe, has caused an increase in Islamophobia. And so I suppose what we are asking you is, how will you combat that discrimination that is generated by the use of that language? Does that make sense? Clear?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, let John go first.
Yeah, I've been on most of the marches in central London. I was amazed when Suella Braverman first claimed they were hate marches. I expect many of you were there. They were actually very loving occasions to be there with other people who all felt the same. Of course we didn't like what the Israeli government was doing, but I never heard any remarks aimed at Jewish people, you know, who live amongst us in a peaceful way. There are lots of Jewish people on the marches themselves, as you will have all seen. It's not about religion or race or ethnic grouping. It's about colonialism, and it's about Israel trying to perpetuate its unjust rule over Palestine. And this is the last-ditch attempt, I think, by some of these conservative and probably other politicians to try and demonize us, the ordinary people of Britain. I mean, I've been out on the streets with these leaflets, you know, you've probably seen me, and I'm sure the other candidates have felt the same reactions. Nobody supports what Israel is doing. Nobody agrees with Labour and Tory refusing to call for a ceasefire. Ordinary, decent people of Britain don't want to see innocent men, women and children starved to death, run over by tanks. To say this is that we are behaving like a mob is just complete lying. And of course it's propounded by the Daily Telegraph, the Mail, and some of those other newspapers who don't actually go on the marches, and their readers don't go on the marches, so they believe this kind of propaganda. I don't know if Islamophobia has particularly increased. I mean, I was a bit surprised, and I investigated a bit, this report from the so-called Community Security Trust that said that anti-Semitism had risen by some extraordinary percentage. And I looked at that report. I looked at it. And there is one, this is according to a Zionist organization, there was one instance that they found of a Jewish person being physically assaulted. One. Now, of course, that shouldn't happen. But most of these alleged anti-Semitic incidents, they listed one. It said a car drove past the synagogue with Palestinian flags out of the window. I mean, this is probably some Zionist, Israel-loving person saying, he looked at me in a funny way and I felt threatened. It goes down as an anti-Semitic event, probably in their list. I don't really, I mean, maybe you do have, maybe some of you as Muslims do have instances that you've personally witnessed of people being directing hatred against you. I wonder though, I mean, possibly this is an exaggeration as well. I don't think I answered all parts of the question. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay,
In answer to the question of how do we get rid of this atmosphere, it's quite simple. We kick out this dreadful Tory government, because they are actually shameful in the way that they are generating these issues. It's not actually about Gaza. It is about trying to stir up hatred within our country, trying to set one group of people against another group of people. And they are trying to appeal, and that man Lee Anderson's trying to appeal to white working class people to suggest that their lives are threatened by other people in society. And there's nothing further from the truth. But it is, Rishi Sunak is just actually at the bottom of the barrel, scraping for actually using hatred terms. He's describing people who exercising their democratic right as mobs. They're not mobs. They're people like you and I that have a view and want to express it. Now there has to be some controls over this. You know, the Foreign Secretary lives around the corner. I don't expect us all to go and stand outside his house chanting, because he and his family and his neighbours don't actually deserve that. Where we should be beating him is in the ballot box and kicking him out of office, because that's how we work in a democracy. And I really want to disassociate myself with some of John's comments, because I think any hatred towards any sector in society is wrong. Whether they are Jewish people or Muslim people, we have to work together in this country. And actually, individuals aren't wrong. Some of the Israeli politicians are vile. It doesn't mean that everybody who shares that race or ethnicity
He
history as
didn't
well.
say that.
No, but he's suggesting that there aren't any issues of anti-Semitism at the moment. I suspect there are, and I suspect there's a lot of Islamophobic comments as well. So, I mean, we need to just wind back and wind things down and try and make sure that society is much more generous and understanding of each other's and differences. What's going on in Gaza is dreadful. That doesn't mean that we have to start building up hatred within our own society. So I want to firstly kick out this government because they are just stirring it up for political purposes. And then we have to start working for peace in Gaza, and hopefully Britain could lead the way, which is not at the moment, that it could set an example by sanctions, by getting people around the table working with the Kuwaitis and the Egyptians to make sure that there is a peaceful outcome and a long-term solution to the Palestine problem.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chair. Throughout history, the establishment, the powerful, the monarchy have always referred to us as the mob. They are very, very fearful about change, about challenge, about them being called out. And if you look at history, where it's from the Chartists, the Peterloo, there's a massive demonstration in about 1834 in Kennington, where the crowds were huge calling for the vote. The Times and other right-wing papers then were calling them the mob. So I take great comfort from being called the mob. That makes me even more determined to go on marches and protests and pickets and lobbies, and we should all be part of that going forward. So as the Mayor, I would want to call out and challenge anybody who referred to that term and put out on the Council's website an explanation, calling from history, challenging that use of that term because it's derogatory and it's anti-democratic, because all of us need to be part of a democracy. And a journalist interviewed me the other day and said, Nick, why are you going banging on about Gaza? It's got nothing to do with this country. And I challenged him, said, look, we are global citizens, we're international citizens. Many people have connections around the world, and we need to organise, we need to challenge. When our kindred folk are being assaulted and attacked, we're not going to stay quiet. We need to be on the streets protesting and marching, because anything in history has been not given to us. We've had to fight for it, tooth and nail, against the establishment and the ruling class. So I would ask you all to don the sign, the mob, with pride.
Peaceful protest is a central right of democracy. If you don't have peaceful protest, then you are no longer a democracy. We should condemn every incident of Islamophobia whenever it arises, but equally we should condemn every incident of anti-Semitism whenever it arises. We should treat both of these problems equally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for all the questions that are put in. What I will try and do is possibly amount might be answered already, or will be answered there. And we also have some specific questions to individual parties, which I will maybe leave to the end, towards the end, where people have asked questions of specific candidates. So, one of the questions is, many people across our community of all faiths feel unrepresented currently by the political process, which has moved to the right. What will each of you do, or are doing, to push back censorship, right-wing scaremongering and dividing the community further? So that was one of the questions from the floor. So if we start, can we start with you, Mike? I think the question is about people generally feel unrepresented by the political parties that they are seeing. And so there is that big gap between how people perceive and what they feel the political parties are saying to them in general. So I think that's probably more, it's about how we bridge that gap, how we bridge that gap.
How would you engage with people?
And engage, yeah.
Well, there should be a greater dialogue between the parties and the Muslim community on a whole range of issues. And not only Gaza, but also housing and health. And we should always have an open door to your community to engage with you with all your concerns. I think some of the other parties may have downplayed their relationship with you, but the Green Party, we welcome an engagement with you.
Well, I think one of the big problems is that this borough at the moment only has elected politicians from the Labour Party. There's one independent because she was expelled from the Labour Party. And that's been the case for quite a while now. Actually, way back in 2006, we managed to elect a council which only had half the representatives from Labour. Lib Dems had a lot of councillors, Greens had 6, 2 socialists and 2 conservatives. And but since then it's really just become a one-party state. So of course we feel unrepresented. If you didn't vote Labour, then you don't have someone that is part of, that you voted for. One of the answers to that is a different voting system. In Northern Ireland, you may well know that there was a lot of discrimination against Roman Catholics for decades, and so when the new system was evolved, they used single transferable vote. And now everybody, almost everybody can say, yes, I voted for that person who got elected, because it's a fairer way. It's used also in Scotland, a form of that, and in some other countries around the world. It means that you rank the candidates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 when you go to vote. You don't just put 3 crosses. In 2014, when People Before Profit, my party at the time, was very active, I got 28% of the vote in Telegraph Hill, but I didn't get elected. And I mean, if we looked at those results there, where I think Labour had all the seats bar one, I may be wrong about that. If we looked at it, actually, People Before Profit would have had 7 councillors. I think Lib Dems would have had 8. Conservatives would have had about 5. When we looked at the results, it would have been a mixture. We would have had proper debate in the council chamber. Mind you, the mayor still would have had all the power. Councillors had no power. See my manifesto for that. And Nick as well agree. I think we all agree on getting rid of the mayoral system here. But, how can people feel represented if when they vote, their vote means nothing? That's why so few people do go to vote. What is the point of going to vote, really? Unless you want to vote Labour in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, John is right, and the question is right. People are disengaged in this country because of our electoral system. In Lewisham, about 50% of the people voted Labour last time, and with 100% Labour council. There's no diversity there at all. Down the road, in perhaps deepest Kent, you have councils which were totally conservative, but the whole community is not conservative. And you do need variety, diversity, and a bit of opposition to improve decision making. And nationally, our electoral system is corrupt, and we need to really reform the whole of our political system. A lot of concern is given about the right-wing press in this country. People talk about the Telegraph and the Daily Mail. I don't think many people buy these papers. I don't think anyone actually reads the Daily Mail or the Telegraph. The trouble is, when you turn the radio on, BBC are always telling you what they're saying. We're not a right-wing country. The values held by the vast majority of people in this country are not those of the right-wing press. And we should actually just ensure that we don't get obsessed. And hopefully a general election will come soon, which will kick out the current right-wing party. Just hope it's not replaced with another right-wing Labour Party, who appear to be just totally beholden to these press barons that no one else takes any notice of. But I'm actually quite confident that if we can change our electoral system, the people in this country are very moderate, generous, actually quite left or centre, and want to create a much more caring society, which we can do once we reform the system.
Thank you, Chair. This election will be the first time, all of you, when you go to vote, you're going to have to produce photographic ID. So if you've got a driving license, you're going to be okay, because you can produce that. But what this is really about is voter suppression. In many states in America, majority of black people, because they either got a stop and search or they've been convicted, many states, Texas I think is one of them, they lose their right to vote. And if they've done any prison time or been on parole, that's the same again. My partner and I, we worked for the council, and we would often be part of the voter registration scheme, where we would trudge around with our clipboard, you may have seen them, getting people to register to vote. It is a legal requirement to vote. I think only one of the West London councils have ever prosecuted anybody for not registering, because it's to do with the jury service and having a fair and balanced jury. But in some countries, in some states in America, there's open register. You turn up with some photographic ID at the polling station, you can be given a ballot. So that's something we should be calling for as well. So it's easier for people to vote and participate. But again, I'm coming back to my central theme, which I've mentioned earlier. You are only going to get a voice as voiceless people, as has been mentioned in our borough, by politically organising, coming together, working with other parties, establish yourselves as a powerful political voice, and start saying to the Labour Party, don't take our vote for granted. On Gaza, you didn't even call for a ceasefire. You suspended Labour councillors across the country. Even a Jewish councillor in Lambeth this week has been suspended. So their position is appalling. They don't deserve your vote. You need to organise, work with others to help you get off the ground. And I would argue that you should look at a couple of wards in the borough maybe for the local elections. There's 2 years before the next round of elections. And you could put up a candidate, whether they stand as an independent or linked to another party, but put out that message. You didn't vote for a ceasefire, you ain't going to get our vote.
Well done.
Okay, I think we'll have one more question. There's a lot of questions which sort of have been covered, I think, in one way or another. Just a technical question that's come up was that somebody put a question whether people would declare any affiliations they have. So obviously we know that many of the local Labour MPs and some of the councillors are affiliated to Labour Friends of Israel. One question was, does any of the panel here have affiliations? Not necessarily I wouldn't imagine any of you are members of Labour Friends of Israel, but any other sort of similar type affiliation. So that was one. And I think then we've got some other questions which are related to some other issues in terms of the council and electoral issues. So we'll move on after that question. So, what?
I don't have any affiliations with anything to do with Israel. So, no.
Okay, thank you.
No, does the party though? Sorry, that was my question. Does the party have any?
The Green Party does, as far as I know. It does not.
Well, I'm a member of the London Clarion Cycling Club. I don't know if that should be declared.
Thanks for your declaration.
I sing in the Strawberry Thieves Socialist Choir, as I've mentioned, and I very occasionally have played in the Big Red Band along with John Claydon, who's in the audience here, and that's a left-wing choir, left-wing band we play at May Day. But I don't have anything to do with any other political organisations, and as far as I'm aware, the Workers' Party of Great Britain is not part of any of those kind of extra parliamentary kind of things that MPs often like to be part of.
Thank you.
I'm trying to rack my brains of anything that I'm involved with. I'm a member of, have been in Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace in the past. I'm certainly not involved in any faith group, I'm afraid. I am a supporter of the Liberal Democrat Campaign for Racial Equality, which is a group that just tries to make our own party a lot more diverse and make sure that we can attract people from different backgrounds to stand for our party, and we campaign on issues that are relevant, more relevant to some people than others. We as a party have been campaigning against stop and search, and that's something that affects young black people more than young white people in this borough, so that's something that really concerns us. I'm also a supporter of Chinese Liberal Democrats, just because they have a really good New Year dinner, which I go to. But I hope that my party and I are quite open to everybody rather than any sectarian group.
Thank you.
And next, sorry.
Well, I must make a declaration. I rent 5 rods on my allotment from the Knapmill Way Allotment Society. I rent 1 space in a bicycle hangar in Harringay. I own 3 bicycles, one of them folding. And I own 10 shares in the Morning Star. And I think that's the sum total of my wealth. But yeah, I'm a local government worker. Obviously, we have to make declarations of any outside earnings. I wish that was the case. But so that's the sum total. But in reality, the main political parties, and especially the Labour Party, I think I saw somewhere, 40% of the shadow cabinet are receiving donations from Israeli-linked organisations. 40%.
That's the shadow.
Yeah, it's a shadow.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have some other questions, and if there are other questions that people want to ask, if they contact the people with
I've got a question.
Okay, yes, let's have Secretary ask a question.
This is a question in relation to Lewisham Council, actually. And it's a straightforward one, nothing hard at all. What do you feel about PFIs, and how would you balance the books, etc., at Lewisham Council, bearing in mind they've actually outsourced every service and every all the services. So how would you balance the books?
Do you want to just explain very briefly what PFI, or
Okay.
maybe the candidates can address
It's
that?
basically a public finance initiative whereby the government handed out the contract for building work, for contract,
Okay, we'll let the candidates address that.
etc. So they didn't have to push up the money.
Anybody particularly want to go first with that? Okay.
So, private finance initiative is something that actually was started under Gordon Brown back in 2000s, and it is quite obnoxious. It's the way that hospitals were financed, schools were financed, street lighting in Lewisham is financed. I'm very proud that Lewisham local Liberal Democrats took a motion to our party conference condemning PFI, and actually it was in the Liberal Democrat manifesto that we would actually nationally buy back the PFIs. You might wonder how that affects people. Well, the hospital, the Prue Hospital, was built under a PFI scheme, which means that it costs a huge amount of money just to run a hospital. Because there's a managing agent and a company that runs it, so if a nurse needs a new cupboard put up, they can't just have someone come in and screw up a new cupboard. They have to go through this whole process of it all being worked out over the debt over 25 years. And it can cost thousands of pounds just to put a cabinet up, so that the finance companies make all this huge amount of money as a result of it. You know, the Labour government at the end of 2000s, around 2008-9, were looking at contracting health service in South East London, and they had to close a hospital, they told us. And Lewisham was very much under threat. Lewisham actually has a PFI wing on the top, and that actually saved it, because the hospital they closed was the one hospital that didn't have any PFI, which was Queen Mary's in Sidcup, because they couldn't afford for the financiers to suffer. Totally regardless of how the patients would react and who needed the hospital. It's all down to whose money it is at the end of the day. So PFI is quite, it's disgraceful. We should not be financing, it's like a big public mortgage that you're financing today's services by putting off the cost over 30 or 40 years. Lewisham Council have gone down that route, and you can't just overnight stop it, but I would certainly as Mayor work to bring services back in-house and make sure that we finance stuff differently. You know, we could have bonds, we could raise money from the community to build stuff. We could actually, like a building society, build homes by borrowing from the community to build rather than get people in the city to finance it and then take all the benefit. So I think it's a wrong way of financing public services, and it needs to be curtailed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, you have your hand up next.
Yeah, I mean, for many years I represented Unite the Union, and many of our members worked for some of the contractors, road maintenance and some of the leisure services, and they were very exploited. Any shop steward who raised issues of health and safety would be threatened and intimidated. So as a mayor, obviously like other candidates here, I would look to bring services back in-house. That has started to happen. The housing department has been brought back in-house. They're now back in the town hall. But a few months ago, I was contacted by my regional organiser, and he told me, Nick, do you know that Lewisham is on the brink of bankruptcy? Not days, weeks, but hours. So this authority, it's interesting that we haven't got Brenda Dacres here tonight. We could put that question directly to her. But as you've heard in the news tonight, many local authorities are on the financial precipice. And one of the reasons why is homelessness. So I would be arguing for more people to be made, temporary accommodation is one of the reasons why people are struggling, but ending the use of bed and breakfast at phenomenal cost. But there's one organisation which is running care homes in this borough. I can't possibly name them, but we used to have local authority care homes. But this organisation has virtually got a monopoly, and they are stinging this authority massively for care costs. And that's homelessness and care costs, two of the reasons why local authorities are going bust. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to leave Lewisham and put the arguments around homelessness and housing, but also bringing back in services, bringing back in-house all the services that used to be. I mean, I work for a North London borough, and it's a different culture. Virtually everything is still, it's quite remarkable, is still in-house. And everybody works together. There's a comradeship and partnership with the trade union movement. Lewisham, some years ago, we had a leader of the council. His name now escapes me.
Dave Sullivan.
But he's very similar to a guy called T. Dan Smith, who was corrupt and was involved in contracts and building houses. Get Carter. If any of you want to see a good film before you die, Get Carter. And they filmed it in a multi-storey car park, one of the scenes in a multi-storey car park, which T. Dan Smith took backhanders from because of the contracts were going out to private contractors. So services in-house, health and safety, unions recognised, that's the way forward. Not this externalising anything that moves. That was the culture of Lewisham.
Yeah, well, Nick and I worked together in People Before Profit for a long time about bringing services back in-house, but to come to the PFI part of it, and Chris, did you know, actually they were started by Tories. The first PFIs were very small contracts under the last days of the John Major government, but it was Labour that really brought them in. Now, when I heard about PFIs, I thought, but that can't be good value for money. You know, taking the example of the two hospitals, £210 million it cost to actually build the two hospitals, Greenwich and Bromley. Do you know what the repayments are spread over 25 years? 1,200 million. And if you look on my website, johnhamilton.org.uk, there's an excellent explanation of PFI, a lovely infographic. It shows how much the cost was for Downham Leisure Centre and pools, or the various different school programmes that this borough asked for through PFI. How much has already been paid back, and it's already more than the cost in I think all but one of those cases, and how much the total is going to be. Now, I think it was Chris said we can't change it overnight. We can, if you elect me, almost overnight. You have to be radical about this. You all know the concept of a loan shark. I hope nobody's used the services of a loan shark. This is legalised loan sharking at the interest rates that's being charged. Have you ever heard of something called odious debt? It means if some nasty ruler of some country or borough enters into a contract which impoverishes its citizens because of the repayments, But they weren't consulted. And was anyone here consulted about the street lighting contract going to Skanska for £90 million over 30 years? No, we weren't. Bullock never put that on his manifesto when he said he was going to be elected. So odious debt means if I'm elected as mayor, I will simply say, we're not paying. We will not pay anymore. You have to take us to court, and then there'd be a test case. It's all very well these boroughs saying we'll renegotiate it, but that still leaves the upper hand with the loan sharking bankers, doesn't it? If you've already paid the money 3 times over, why should we pay any more? Nick's quite right. Lewisham is on the verge of bankruptcy, and partly for the reasons he's given on contracting out, and that should be ended, and I would end that too. But also PFI. It's horrendous. Look at the website and look at the graphs.
Thank you.
The problem is that the council is not getting enough money to sustain services because government keeps on cutting it. There's not enough. There needs to be a reform of the whole taxation system in this country, and the Green Party support a wealth tax so that those who are rich who can afford to pay, they pay their fair share to restore the social fabric of the country. So we need to start taxing the rich to ease the burden on the poor, and so we need to have more money coming in so that we can invest that in services in this Lewisham.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A question has come in relation to youth clubs and community facilities. What severely cut in Lewisham, and so many people here are parents, they have children, and what would your strategy be in relation to youth and community services and facilities within the borough? Anybody want to take it first? John?
I make particular reference to this in my leaflet, and you're welcome to a leaflet afterwards, and if you'd like to help me distribute them in your street, that would be also very kind. The first campaign I was involved in Lewisham in 1999, sorry, that's not quite true, I did do some leafleting for the Liberal Party when I was very young, was when the council wanted to bring in charges for the under-5s playgroups in the parks. I was a parent at home with my young daughter. My partner went out to work, she had a good job, and so I used to go to the Telegraph Hill Play Club. It's invaluable as a parent to go and meet other parents, the children meet other children, you make friends for life there, and they wanted to bring in charges of 50p a session. You might think 50p a session, well that's not very much, but it changes the whole feeling of the place. So what I did was, got a petition together, went to all the play clubs all around the borough, there were 9 of them at the time. Parents in pushchairs and toddlers went to the council, gave in the petition, and this was actually before Bullock. And we said, and if you do bring in the charges, we won't pay. And they didn't bother. They didn't try and bring them in. You have to be firm. But 4, 5, 6 years later, Bullock did close them all down and left them to be run by volunteers, whereas I say that if I'm elected, I've said this many times because I've stood for mayor before, that I will open new play clubs, council funded, within walking distance of everybody in the borough. If you're a parent in a flat, it's raining, you haven't got a garden, you'd go mad. You know, with your toddlers and nowhere to go. This is essential, and it's just the same for youth clubs. It's just the same for community centres. When Bullock tried to close down the 33 community centres, we in People Before Profit, and Nick was involved as well, I'm not trying to say it was me, but People Before Profit organised for representatives from all of those threatened groups to come together for a meeting in the Constitutional Club. They didn't all come, but all of the ones that made a fight were saved. It's interesting, you can win against the council if you fight. Everybody's made a case, or 11 of them or so made a good case, and Bullock said, we'll give you a reprieve of 2 years. Well, later, I became a trustee of one of these threatened community centres, and I said, a bit later on, was it only a 2-year reprieve we were given? Has anything been said? They dropped it. We actually had won. And you have to fight to win.
When I was a boy, we went to a youth club down in the local church, down St Saviour's. And I think we should make use of more of the religious officers to make youth clubs in there. Okay?
Thank you.
And,
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, youth and community. An idea was developed a little while ago, and all the staff and workers were spun out. That means they were set free from the local authority and some sort of trust. So as the Mayor, I would say we should be spinning those services back in, and we should be looking at funding. There's one fund, there's one pot of money that's very rarely spoken about within the council, and that's called the New Homes Fund. It's thousands of the new build properties that are developed in this borough. I went to inspect a block of flats down in Deptford yesterday, and coming back I didn't recognise up to Deptford the number of tower blocks that have gone up. And every block that goes up, Lewisham and any other local authority gets an amount of money from central government. So questions have to be asked. What's happened to this New Homes Fund when so many thousands of new houses and flats have been built in certain pockets of the borough? So they perform a valuable role, youth centres and community centres, invaluable. I'm from the West Midlands, and I used to live in Leamington Spa, and we would cycle down to a youth club in Covington Village, and I developed my passion for snooker in my local youth club, and that I was able then to hustle my way through university by playing right-handed when I was really left-handed. So they give people invaluable skills going forward, and it's really important in terms of tackling knife crime, in terms of tackling youth offending. There needs to be, as has been said, somewhere for young people to go, and we need to keep those open. But as has been indicated, it's a struggle. It's going to be a fight where communities have to come together.
It's a very good question, because I think the whole need of community facilities and amenities are really important. And over the last few years, knife crime across London has not dropped. It's just fallen off from the media. And it's still a huge problem with young people feeling threatened when they go out on the streets. And we need to do a lot more to engage with them. I would like to see much more innovative things. We talk about a youth club, but actually, because that's what we did when we were young, is that really what's needed now? Perhaps Lewisham needs young people to have an opportunity card, which gives them access to music venues and cinemas and sports venues, and allows them to travel around London, benefiting from the rich culture that exists in London. How do we finance these things? One thing that Lewisham is really bad at, and that is screwing down developers. These people are making huge amounts of money from building. Take the Gateways development around Lewisham Station. They should not only be delivering a lot more social homes, but they should be delivering facilities. They could be delivering a brand new library for Lewisham Town Centre, because they've got the planning permission. They're building all these houses. They need to give back something in the way of community facilities and amenities. What great facility we could have with a huge new learning hub, library, whatever you want to call it. Somewhere young people can go and study after school, and perhaps be there in the evening to take out videos, if that's what people do, DVDs or whatever the latest thing is, games machines, whatever young people are into at the moment. I'm not one, so I don't really know what they want. That's why we need to talk to them, find out what they want. But we ought to be using providers in society to make sure that they pay for it. Developers are getting away scot-free in Lewisham because our council's very weak at negotiating with them. And I'd like to see them making sure they contribute to things that the young people want. And it's not just young people, it's as John mentioned, playgroups, it's Sure Starts, it's GP surgeries, it's all the infrastructure that we need to make sure that we have a great community. And we ought to be making sure that developers are paying for that.
Oh, you've done it. Okay.
I'll have another go.
I think we all do.
Right, okay, so just to bear in mind that it is now 18 minutes past 8. We are aiming to finish this meeting by 20 to 9. So we have about 20 minutes left, and we've got quite a lot of questions still to come. People are coming. This question, so if we can make contributions quite briefly to the point. One question has been about support for children with special educational needs. Now, I don't know if you have read recently in the press, but it is said that 96% of the appeals against support because it seems that children with special educational needs are getting routinely refused services. And 90% of the appeals against not providing services have been upheld, so the parents' view has been upheld. So this has become a crisis. So it has now become a sort of almost a money-saving strategy, and not just in Lewisham maybe, but across that young people with special educational needs are not being given the services they need, and they're forcing parents into either going through the process of appeals or suffering because of not getting that support. So, any comments on services for special educational needs children? Yes, Chris.
John has been plugging his literature. If you want to look at the Mayor's booklet, my manifesto, you'll see that I actually mentions special education needs, because I also mentioned that the culture in Lewisham is wrong. And for any parent that has a problem with their child, they have to go to war with the council. It really is a fight, and it is really distressing that a family needs to find experts and go to court and tribunals. It shouldn't be like that. Your child should be assessed and their needs met. But in Lewisham, it's a fight. And that is wrong, because actually the stronger parents win. Those kids whose parents aren't able to fight just fall by the wayside. So I would certainly want to ease the situation and make the whole system simpler. We talked about the finances in Lewisham Council. One of the problems is the cost of special education. Children with really severe needs, it's incredibly expensive. But you have to start at the beginning, and it's early intervention that we need. So I'd like to see mental health workers or wellbeing workers in each school to help kids that are struggling a bit, as they've got someone to talk to before it gets into a real major problem. And so I'd want to see, as I say, a mental health worker in every school. I'd like to see much more early assessments for children when they enter school. If they've got language difficulties, speech difficulties, that picked up as quickly as possible and dealt with. Because if that child has to wait, and this is what Lewisham do, they just delay it and delay it and delay it, and the kid can get into secondary school still with their needs not met, then it becomes much more expensive to try and catch up at the time. So it's early intervention and make sure that it's not a battle between the parents and the authority.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the reasons why this probably won't be the most popular view in this room, but I'm opposed to the Bakerloo line extension. And one of the reasons I'm opposed to that is because the Wearside depot, where special education needs transport is based, is going to be, going to be lost. That depot is going to be given over to a siding, and the council will have to relocate all its refuse service and its sort of transport and bus systems for people with learning difficulties, special educational needs. So that's one of the reasons I'm worried about the Bakerloo line. But the substantive point I would make is abolishing the mayor would mean a return to a very powerful committee structure where this issue would be championed, would be advocated by a powerful committee chairperson who would have it in their remit, as used to happen. For example, we used to have a private sector housing subcommittee where we had specialist knowledge developed by councillors and especially by the chair and vice chair of those committees. They would be there to advocate for their services. And this is why it's so important to abolish this all-powerful, all-centralising. How can you possibly know every bit of legislation? I work for North London Borough and I've got what's called a permit. And when I put it out, it's about that long in terms of all the local authority legislation that impacts people's lives. So it was down to having a proper chair who can advocate for their services. So abolishing the mayor could be a key part of this strategy.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on special educational
Well, yeah, I don't
needs?
think Nick mentioned special educational needs very much, but I think what it sounds like, I used to be a primary school teacher. In fact, I was a nursery school teacher at one of the oldest nurseries in Britain, in Deptford, the Rachel Macmillan. And you need to pick up these things early on because parents don't necessarily know. I mean, it needs to be much earlier than is happening. It sounds from, I didn't realise it was such an issue, as Chris mentioned, and your questioner mentioned, that it's such a struggle. The council sounds as though it's just trying to fob people off. They should be there to support the children and the families from the very beginning and not make it a struggle for people who are least able to fight.
Well, I agree that early assessment of special educational needs children should be done and it should be supported all the way through the process, right the way through school. That's what I agree.
Thank you. Okay, question here about housing. There's two questions actually, but I will try and put them together. One is about the appalling conditions in Milford Towers, and how would you address that? Or what strategies you could think of addressing that? And the second one is about rent caps and out of control renting in the private sector. I think the last time I heard of one bedroom sort of studio flat in Lewisham is at least £1,200 a month. And so, yes, so housing in general, but specifically there was a question about appalling housing conditions in Milford Towers, which has had quite a lot of publicity in the press. And the second one was about rent caps and rent in the borough. Nick, you wanted to start off.
Thank you.
Again, if I can ask you to be quite brief.
Okay. Right. I'm a housing worker and I inspect 18-metre story dwellings dealing with cladding and issues like that. But also, I'm a licensing officer, and I have obviously within dwellings there are 29 houses, and damp and mould is highly scored, highly rated. And I've been carrying out some inspections. I went to visit Milford Towers recently and was taken round by the tenant activists and shown some of the squalid conditions. And I did a fire risk assessment following Grenfell. The fire safety order has been strengthened and people need to have proper security in their dwellings. People died in Grenfell because they didn't have a smoke seal around their doors, and fumes and toxic fumes got into flats. So I didn't find any of those deficiencies in Milford Towers, but what I did find is loads and loads of rubbish, and that was another contributing factor in Grenfell, was flammable rubbish not being taken away by the... So I've raised that with the fire brigade. I've raised it with a certain person called Fenella, who heads up Lewisham Homes. Haven't had a reply, wonder why. So I'm also going to do a report on another tower block, and they had a fire. Housing for Women had a fire 2 years ago, and I went to visit a block next door, and the same issue is there. Good fire safety, but loads of rubbish. Basic caretaking is not being carried out, so people are at risk. Rent caps, there's no power within the 2004 Housing Act to control rents. All Labour are saying is they're going to introduce rent caps. They're not introducing or reintroducing rent controls. Even in the belly of the beast, in America, in New York, they have rent controls. So we need rent controls, and that could be another campaign that we can be involved in together. Lobbying government, lobbying the council, and Sadiq Khan has made reference to rent controls, but there's no power to do so. And I don't think this government, many of them, are landlords themselves. So we've got to struggle.
Specifically on Milton Towers, I know people there, visited flats there. The history is quite important because one of the problems with Lewisham Council is that the last 5 years, nothing's happened. We've had 5 chief executives, a mayor that's gone off to do his own thing in the other part of the country, and nothing's been driven forward. Milton Towers and that shopping precinct was bought by the council in about 2014.
So, yeah.
The idea was to knock down the estate and build houses. The reason it needs knocking down was when it was built in the 60s, it was this fantastic development for single people. The idea was that each flat was for young as we call them, yuppies, I guess nowadays, would have, a bit like the Barbican in the city, Lewisham would have this fantastic estate, but of course the council's never maintained it properly. It's put families into the blocks, which, as I say, was designed for young people or single people. And then since 2014, when they were going to knock it down and redevelop it, nothing's happened. And that is the same across Lewisham. Projects have just not progressed. You look at the gateway development around the station, that's a decade they've been building that. It's just crazy. This council really needs to get its act together and drive things forward and start delivering for its residents. And that's the problem with that housing estate. They've just ignored it for the last 7 years. Of course, it's dilapidated, and now they're starting to do stuff. But it's not very cost effective leaving something to decline over 7 years and then have to realise you need to spend money on it, and still its future's not sure. So that is the main problem with Lewisham, is that it just doesn't move things forward, doesn't get things done. It's not a proactive organisation, it's just sitting there not delivering for residents. There's another part of the question which I forgot. Rent caps. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, as Nick says, there's very little the council can do. We can, as he knows, look after the private sector better and license them. I think Newham and places have done that, and we've had schemes here, but we need to be doing that. But we, as a community, need more family houses. All the tower blocks that Nick mentioned being built in Deptford are flats, 1 and 2 bedroom flats. That's not meeting the housing need of the homeless, the families in temporary accommodation. We need a council that starts telling developers that we need family homes and build family homes so that it helps as many people in temporary accommodation who've got children. We should be making sure that our children are adequately housed, as are their parents, because that's the way that they can thrive and make them proud of being in Lewisham.
The Greens are one of the few national parties that has a policy of rent control, and when we get into power, when we get elected into power, then we will enforce that.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about Milford Towers, although that's what the question was. But I'm not disagreeing, especially with Nick and Chris and Mike, but I wouldn't bother to talk to developers about telling them to make houses for families. I don't want developers involved at all. If you look at my leaflet, if you look at my website, you'll know how involved I was in housing campaigns. We built a little house on the town hall lawn and lived in it for a week. A house made out of estate agent poles and placards. Go and look at it, it's called the House of Cards. What the solution is the council, this is my view anyway, obviously not Damien Egan's or Brenda Dacre's, is that we should be having a direct works department. I remember saying this in 2006 when Bullock was sitting next to me at the Mayoral hustings. That was in the days when Labour candidates did attend. And he said, what, you want to bring back architects? Yes, it's a council. It needs to build houses for people. Do you know it costs about £75,000 to £100,000 to build a house or a flat? And then you don't need to charge high rents. You charge proper council rents. And you get the money in, even from the low, reasonable rents that covers the cost of building it. They've got land. There's still the land at Besson Street where we built an eco house, to shame them, that the land is still empty. And that's the answer. Don't let developers have the land. Don't just say, we don't want you here. We will build on this land and we will make it a self-sustainable model. You get the rent in, which covers the building of the next few houses.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now at 8:30, and so what I would ask is to finally sort of have some concluding comments from yourselves. What I would say, we have a whole range of questions still. People have come in relation to Palestine. One is about what solutions would you put forward? So obviously, if there was a ceasefire, what would you suggest in terms of a solution going forward from a ceasefire? That was one. We've had questions about the treatment of prisoners in Belmarsh, when people were incarcerated without trial, but especially in relation to Julian Assange and whether you would agree that he should be freed. And I think the other question was really, as there is a real chance that none of you as candidates will be elected to the next mayor. What is your strategy going forward, and especially in relation to engaging with the Muslim community, in taking part with the Muslim community around support for Palestine? So I'm aware that some people may not have had their questions answered in full. Sort of do a summary and maybe say briefly why people should vote for you as opposed to anybody else, and then also let people know how to get more information on your campaigns. Yeah. So, Mike, you want to start? Sorry about the long, convoluted questions.
Well, on Palestine, I think after the ceasefire, we need to put pressure on the British government, to put pressure on the Americans, to put pressure on Israel, to get a two-state solution finally. Because America has been stalling for so many years because it views Israel as its main ally in the Middle East. And so we need to get a permanent two-state solution on that. Why, even though you're unlikely to vote for me as mayor, I think it's important to get the green profile out in this country and to engage with the Muslim community. So now we need to force those ties and greater, so that when issues like Palestine come up, we can make progress on that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite likely that none of us will be elected because too many people go and vote Labour out of habit. This is my poster. It's asking people not to vote Labour or Tory because they both support genocide. And I have copies of this poster here for you afterwards if you like. But I do believe in cooperating. I've already talked to all these people here because one of the big problems is the mayoral system. You'll know that Nick was involved initially at the first instance in a meeting in the Constitutional Club, but then didn't do any of the work of collecting the signatures. The Liberal Democrats did collect some signatures for it, but by far the most of the work was done by people before profit. The Greens nominally were part of it. I want us all, not just Muslims, but everybody who feels unrepresented in Lewisham Council, to help in a campaign to collect 10,000 signatures, which triggers a referendum for us to all be able to vote in May 2025 to abolish the mayoral system and go back to the committee system, which I think everybody here supports. But we have to force it, and that involves everybody. It can involve everybody. And I'll be calling we'll be having some kind of a meeting or mail out afterwards, after the election, to involve people. It just needs asking other voters for signatures on a form. I don't believe in the two-state solution. That is a recipe for disaster for Palestine, to continually be dominated by the powerful military and aggressive neighbour. I want a one-state solution, secular state for Palestine, and Israel has broken international law ever since its founding back in 1948, and I think really it's time for the global south, the countries that are not dominated by the USA and Zionist funding, to push through the United Nations de-recognition of the illegal state of Israel. You may be surprised at that, but it has no basis in international law because they didn't follow the precepts laid down by the United Nations resolution which allowed the two states, to be founded in 1948. I won't take more of your time. I'd like you to get involved in my campaign. I hope you'll support me as the most radical alternative for this borough. while I have great respect for the other candidates here, and we actually get on quite well, I think. I didn't meet Mike before, but with Greens in the past, we've got on well together. But if you want someone that will actually deliver, vote for me.
But I think, again, I'd like to just thank Muslim Voice for inviting and setting this up. And I hope actually one or two of you might go away and think, actually, I'd quite like to get involved and get onto the council. And that's the best way of engaging with the community, making sure that you have representatives on the council that speak on your behalf and speak on behalf of the wider community. It's not just about being mayor. There are council by-elections coming up. Definitely, if Labour do win the mayoralty next Thursday, there will be a by-election because the mayor can't be a councillor. An opportunity for us to get someone on the council, because the one-party state that we have in Lewisham is not democratic, it's not delivering for residents, and actually we can, once we break through, start delivering better services for local residents. So there is that opportunity, and hopefully you will engage with that. And if we do have opposition councillors here, perhaps we can engage on a regular basis and have meetings like this, forums where we can exchange ideas, hear about people's housing problems, special education needs, and actually hear firsthand what people's issues are so that we can take them into the council chamber and deal with them. As far as the thorny issue of Palestine, I mean, I think the priority is for a ceasefire to make sure that humanitarian aid gets in there. You know, let's deal with the problem at the moment. 2 million people really suffering, and we need the world to react to that and get a ceasefire in a matter of days rather than. And I'm a confident person, and I think actually there will be a solution resulting from this war, because the Israeli government being so extreme. I think the rest of the world will suddenly realise actually this can't keep happening, and we've got to find a solution. And I think we're like a two-state solution is the only one on offer. And let's hope that there is opportunity in the future to create that.
We have 30,000 dead people. We have a majority of them, 70% I understand, are women and children. We have many, many thousands, I would imagine thousands of people buried under that rubble. And twinning, we actually twin with Nicaragua, believe it or not. You don't know that, but that we are. So why can't we twin with Gaza and some of the cities in Gaza? And we could then send aid, we could send support, we could help fund thermal imaging cameras to find out where people are. We've got a whole range of support we could give. Medical aid. We've got many thousands of children who've lost limbs. They will have life-changing injuries. So the question is, what is to be done? And we need to, it's your meeting tonight, your inaugural meeting, to organise yourselves politically. And my organisation, Transform, I'm sure others will help, to get you off the ground in terms of making a political intervention, a political voice. And I got one of my leaflets at the back, is Labour think they've got it in the bag. Why don't we give them a surprise and actually have a seismic landslide change? Whether it's myself or John, or whether it's the Greens came second, some distant second, but if Brenda Dacus thinks she's got it on a plate, I'll just give you an example. In Michigan, a solid democratic state, 100,000 people put not quite sure about Biden on their ballot. 100,000, 15% of the population have got serious questions to ask about the Democrats and Biden's approach to Israel. So there's everything to play for. Never rule anything out in politics. Some of us are going to be waking up into the small hours of the morning. There could be an earthquake in Rochdale. Who knows? But I would struggle. I would actually probably have to hold my nose and vote for Galloway. But I would still vote for it. But the reality is, we as an organisation here locally, we are facing a real challenge. But if we come together, and it's not helped by John using a placard festooned in Nazi swastikas. The police told Lewisham Council that if they published John's leaflet within the mayoral booklet, the council would be prosecuted.
Could be prosecuted.
Well, and John has been arrested for carrying that placard. So it doesn't help win friends and allies if you are going to be taking that sort of tactics. We've got to influence people, we've got to come together. And I've been on most of the marches, both locally. I even went on a march in Bromley, and my daughter came and joined me. So we've got to build bridges between communities, not alienate and antagonise. So I think we should, from this meeting, really take heart that we've got the world to win.
Okay, well, first I would like to say thank you very much for the candidates who came. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much for the community who have come out tonight. It's raining. What I would say as well, just in conclusion, is to the candidates, we have listened to your views, and thank you very much for that. I think also there is scope for yourselves as candidates, as political actors within the borough, of listening and finding out more about what Islam represents in the borough. Many of the issues that were discussed here by yourselves have echoes within Islamic thought. We discussed PFI here and usury fundamentally. In Islam, very strong statements against what is called riba. We talked about public services, people talked about bonds to try and provide public services. At the moment, the community here is contributing towards building a new mosque. They're not asking the council, they're not going to loan sharks, they're not going to any of those people. So these are concepts which are familiar in the Islam community. We talked here about the demonstrations and the Jewish community. Every Ramadan, without fail, you will find the local rabbi comes to the mosque and talks about Judaism. There is no fundamental hostility between Islam and Judaism. Muslims can go to a kosher butcher and eat kosher meat. So that actually the two religions are very close, and in a lot of demonstrations we have seen a lot of Jewish people. We've had the Orthodox Jews from North London even come and support demonstrations outside Lewisham Council, and it is worth understanding that, because this is not what people portray in the agenda. There is a huge difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. It's huge, because actually if you talk to some of these people, they live in Palestine. You have Palestinian Jews, you have Palestinian Christians, you have Palestinian Muslims. It is one people. So I think that is really important. So I think the other thing I would say is we're coming up to Ramadan. The mosque always has what is called open iftar.
23rd of March.
What did we say?
23rd of March.
23rd of March, yeah. So it is a chance for people who are not Muslims to come to the mosque, break fast with people, observe the prayer, and have a discussion with the Muslim community. That is one thing. That is not the only event. That the mosque has been open for many different events. It's a welcome place, and you should feel, and people in your party should feel welcome. They should feel that this is a part of the community that would welcome them, even without an event. If you wanted to come in and you could ring the mosque and say, oh, I'd like to just come in and watch people pray or have a chat with the imam or something, these are fundamental things. And I think there's a lot of knowledge and learning that can be exchanged between that. And of course we have Eid coming up. We have the Eid at the end of Ramadan, and the following Eid is in the park. In the past we've had the mayor there. We have had, some of these people, the outgoing mayor, who has then absolutely undermined the community by his statements around October the 7th and the website, and many people here have been to the council to try and get that checked. So that's all I would say in conclusion, is that this meeting, I would urge that this is a dialogue. I would hope that everybody from your parties, and I would also then start to make engagements with the community, because this community in Lewisham is here to stay. It's a growing community. Every single week or even day, you have more and more people reverting to Islam. You now have, and you'll find that this is one of the most diverse Muslim communities probably in the country. Now, I think at the mosque, there was at one stage 3 Tonys. One of them, my Allah grant him Al-Jannah Firdaus, one of them passed away, but there are still 2 Tonys at the mosque. And so there are more people, you'll find young people from every single demographic. And not just young people, even elderly people coming into it. So I think this is an opportunity, and this is what we would extend to you, that here is an opportunity to actually engage with this community. You have seen how many people have come out tonight at quite short notice to listen to yourselves. So I would like to thank everybody. May Allah give everybody a safe journey home. Ahmed, do you want to give a dua to end the meeting?
Yeah, so I think the traditional dua of ending meetings, Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. And thank you everyone for your time. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah reward you with all good.
Thank you so much for coming. Well, thank you everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.